we are going to start in on this income and paychecks presentation, and then we'll get about, like I said, about halfway through it. I'm not going to have you do the rest on your own. This one's a little bit more in depth, and so I'm going to walk you through the entire part of it. So you can either follow along on the screen, you can open up the presentation on your own, however works for you, but I'm going to walk through the first little bit, and then we will get into the worksheets for today. All right. Now we're looking at actually earning money. All right. So the way that we can earn money is through compensation. Okay. So that's anything that we receive back for working, for doing a job. All right. We can make money through investing, in which we buy stocks and bonds, and then over time, the value of those go up, and we can earn money that way. All right. We can receive government assistance, so things like unemployment, Social Security, other types of governmental payments and assistance. Okay, we can inherit money. So if somebody else passes on, if they die and they leave us money in their estate, okay, that can be treated as income as well. For the most part of all of these, okay, we're going to focus on this first one. We'll get to investing much later in the class, but for now, we're focusing on this first one, right? So earning money through your job, through working. All right. So even amongst that, there's different types of compensation. Okay. So there's wages. Wages is when you are paid an hourly rate. Okay. There's salary, in which you are paid an annual amount that's then broken up into smaller components. Okay. There are benefits. Okay, so these are non-wage compensation. So it's not things that would necessarily show up in a paycheck, but it could be time off. It could be reimbursement for work expenses. It could be sick leave or vacation. It could be other things like paying for relocation expenses. So if your job moves you to another another city, another state, whatever, they may help pay for that relocation. It could be things like, getting a car as part. So there could be like a company vehicle that you're allowed to drive as part of the job, and so on. Okay. All of those add value to your job, but don't necessarily show up in your paycheck. And then finally, there are tips and commissions, which, tips you receive as usually a part of a service. So, waiters, are probably the most common we think of in the food service industry. But there are other things, hotels often will receive tips, whatever, right? That's a little bit tougher to predict, because wages is a set amount per hour. Salary is a set amount per year that's then broken up. Tips is really based on the customer, and how much they decide. Commission is when you receive a percentage of the sales that you generate. Again, that's really tough to predict. So for the most part, we're going to focus on these first three. All right. So a couple of things to remember, just some helpful reminders. All right. There's a difference between what you earn and what you actually take home in your paycheck. All right. So if I earned $10 an hour and I worked 10 hours this week, right? 10 hours at $10 an hour is $100. My paycheck will not be for $100 though. It'll probably be closer to about $70. All right. So why is that? Well, it's because money is taken out mostly for taxes, but there are some other deductions that can come out of our paycheck. When we talk about deductions, a deduction is just a subtraction. Okay. So any deduction is where money is subtracted from our paycheck. All right. So it's important to understand the difference between what you're earning and what you're actually bringing home in your paycheck. What you earn, okay, or the amount that you actually are getting paid, okay, is called your gross income or your gross pay. Okay, so that's the $10 an hour, that's the $80,000 a year, right? It's whatever is that larger amount, okay? Versus what you actually bring home in your paycheck, okay? That's called your net pay or your net income. All right. When I was little, or when I was first learning this, I always thought of like going out on a lake and fishing. Okay. You have this body of water that's full of fish, right? So, how many fish are there? Well, there's a ton, right? but the amount of fish that I actually take home is whatever I can reel in. Usually what I would, when I was younger, I always pictured like somebody reeling it in and then either, scooping it, like reeling it in into a net or scooping it up into a net. And so I always just remembered that what I take home is what I actually was able to put into that net, right? So gross is everything, but that, how many fish are in that lake, that's the gross amount. The net amount, the amount that I was actually able to reel in and put into that net in the boat, that's what I actually took home. All right, whether that makes sense to you, whether that's helpful or not, right, whatever. But you do need to make sure that you understand or find some way to remember that gross is how much you're earning overall, net is what you're actually bringing home. Okay. So again, why are those numbers different? Because we deduct things, we subtract things from our earnings. So gross pay is everything that you earn, then we subtract or we deduct taxes and buying insurance. If we buy it through our job, okay, that's going to be deducted. If we make retirement contributions to a retirement account through our job, that's going to be deducted. Okay. Those are the most common, those aren't the only things that can be deducted, but again, we subtract out from our earnings and then we keep the rest. That's our net income. All right. Just some other things to make sure that everybody is familiar with or everybody's on the same page. A standard work week is 40 hours. Okay, so how do we come up with that? Well, the standard work week is 5 days a week, right? Generally, we think of Monday through Friday. A standard work day is 8 hours. So 8 hours times 5 days is 40 hours during the week. Okay. What happens if I work more than 40 hours? Well, if you work more than 40 hours and you're a wage earner, you get paid by the hour, you earn overtime. All right. This is really nice. Okay. Because number one, it gives you more of a benefit for working longer than really, the work week is designed to do. So if you work more than 40 hours, you earn overtime. Okay. If you are a wage earner. Hi, hold on, guys, real quick. All right. So coming back to this. So what happens if I work overtime? Well, then I get paid 1.5 times my normal rate. It's usually referred to as time and a half. Okay. So every hour that I work of overtime is as if I worked 1.5 hours. All right. So again, it's a greater benefit so that if you have to work more than 40 hours, it makes it more worth your time. It also gives businesses an incentive not to work you more than 40 hours because every hour that they work you beyond 40 hours costs them 50% more. Okay. So if they're paying you $10 an hour, usually, right, on a given hour, as soon as you go over 40 hours during that week, right now they're paying you $15 an hour. So it's more benefit to you for every hour that you work because it's cutting into your leisure time. Okay. It also gives businesses reason not to try to overwork you because then it becomes much, much more expensive. All right. So again, $10 an hour becomes $15 an hour. $12 an hour becomes $18 an hour for overtime. Now that only applies to the overtime hours. Okay. So if I work 45 hours, the first 40 hours still get my normal rate. Okay. But then the last 5 hours or whatever amount of overtime hours, that's what gets 1.5 times the normal rate. All right. So that's just kind of laying a foundation. Let's talk more specifically about wages. All right. So again, wages is how much you earn per hour. All right. Right now, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. We already watched that video, 30 Days on Minimum Wage. When that aired in 2005, okay, minimum wage was $5.15. So it's risen $2.10 since then. Okay, but it has been decades since it rose. All right, there's a pretty big push from certain political circles, right, to get that minimum wage to increase up to $15 an hour, which would be super helpful. Keep in mind, though, that $15 an hour, if we work 40 hours a week, every week for 52 weeks during the year, right, $15 an hour is still roughly about $31,000. All right. So so some people object that, minimum wage shouldn't be paid that much. Then again, the minimum wage law that was passed was this is the minimum that workers should earn to be able to support themselves, not necessarily a family, not necessarily children, not necessarily, an extravagant life, but they should be able to at least get by. 725 an hour is, it's about $13,000 a year. That is not enough for anybody to survive in this day and age. $15 an hour gets us up just over 30,000. That's a little bit more, realistic to be able to survive. But even still, that is not, that's not an extravagant lifestyle. That's not hitting a lot of wants. That's about enough to cover your needs. All right. Also, just so that you're aware, those plans that would increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour wouldn't happen overnight, right? It wouldn't go from 725 to 15. That would really be a huge shock to our economic system, to especially, businesses that employ a lot of workers. What most plans would be a graduated increase. So 725 would go up probably to about 850 or $9. And then the next year would go up to 11, the next year 13, the next year 15. So it's generally, most plans are call for like a 4 to 5 year progression to get up to that point. Okay. Which becomes much more sustainable. All right. As proof in terms of that the most economies could support this. Okay. Currently right now in the US, Washington, D.C. has the highest minimum wage. All right, their minimum wage is $16.50 an hour. Now, Washington, D.C. isn't a state, so if we wanted to look at which states have the highest minimum wage, currently Washington State has a minimum wage of $15.74. California, just below that at $15.50. Massachusetts at $15. Connecticut is also at $15. So those are the 4 states that are at or above $15 an hour. Currently, Iowa struggling, still at 725 an hour. Okay, so we've got some work to do. Now, we're going to go through some math. I'm going to tell you that right in advance. Okay, for some of you, math is relatively easy. Some of you don't really like math. Okay, we'll try to make this as easy as possible, as painless as possible. But I will forewarn you that this, of any of our units or any of our standards that we cover in this class, this one is the most math heavy. All right, but we will do a lot of practice, okay, over the next week and a half before the assessment on this. All right, so just bear with me, okay? Even if you don't really enjoy math a whole lot, we'll practice a bunch so that hopefully you become a little bit more prepared and you feel a little bit more comfortable and you're not pulling your hair out like that kid. All right. So back to some helpful reminders, some math tips. Okay. We're going to be doing a lot of work with percentages. So when you are doing math with percentages, it's important and useful to turn those percentages into decimals. When you do that, okay, you will drop the percentage sign and then move the decimal 2 spots to the left. Essentially what you're doing is multiplying by 100. Okay, so percent, okay, the prefix cent literally means 100, right? That's why we call a penny a cent, because it takes 100 to get there. That's why we call a century 100 years, right? So cent means 100. So percent literally means per 100. So to turn that percent into a decimal, okay, we're essentially dividing by 100 to get rid of that percentage sign, which then moves the decimal 2 places to the left. So 2% is the same as like 2.0%. Okay, we drop the percentage sign. Now it becomes 2.0. And then now we move the decimal spots 2 places to the left, right? So 2.0, we move it 1 spot to the left, becomes 0.20. We move it 1 more to the left, becomes 0.02. Okay. 6.5%, drop the percentage sign, move the decimal 2 spots to the left, 0.065. Okay. 10%, again, that's the same as 10.0, drop the decimal or drop the percentage, move the decimal 2 spots over, becomes 0.1. All right, second math tip, okay, rounding numbers. So when we deal with dollar amounts, we have to round to the tenths, okay, the second decimal. We don't really talk about dollar amounts being like $10.86, 0.32 cents, right? We round to the nearest penny. So when we're rounding to the penny, which is 2 decimal spots over, okay, we need to look at the third decimal point to see whether or not we round up or down. All right. So just as a reminder, if that third decimal, the third number, the hundredths, or sorry, the thousandths spot right? Is it 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9? We round the number up. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, we round down. If it's 0, we can drop that 0, right? So 24.046, we look at the third decimal place. In this case, it's a 6. Okay, so we're going to round 0.046 up to 0.05. Okay, so we're rounding that second number up because the third number is above 5. All right. In this case, if it were 24.043, we look at that third number. It's less than 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we round this overall number down. So 0.043 rounds down to just 0.04. Okay. And again, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we round that. If that third number is 5 or above, we round the second number up. If the third number is 1, 2, 3, or 4, we round that down, which just maintains that second number. Okay, so again, hopefully that's all review, but it can be a worthwhile reminder. So for some examples, all right, let's say you get paid $11.10 an hour and you work 40 hours a week, right? How much do you earn during the week? That becomes a pretty straightforward calculation. Your gross income, how much you earn, would just be $11.10 per hour times 40 hours. That's $444 for the week. Okay, pretty straightforward. What happens though if you work 2 more hours than that? Okay, let's say that you work 42 hours during the week. Now, all of a sudden, you still get your $40 for the first, or the $11.10 an hour for the first 40 hours. But now for hours 41 and 42, you get paid 1.5 times your normal rate. Okay, so we break this up into 2 calculations. We get our normal rate of $11.10 an hour for the first 40 hours. We just looked at that. That's $444 for the week. But now we have 2 overtime hours. So we take that 11.10 and we multiply it by 1.5. That's 1665 per overtime hour. And in this case, we worked 2 overtime hours, hour 41 and 42. So we multiply that rate times our 2 overtime hours. That means we were paid $33.30 for overtime. Now altogether for the week, we add that up, 444 and 33.30 means that we earned $477.30 for the week. Okay. So a little bit more about wage earners. Okay, 75 million workers in the US get paid an hourly wage. All right, that's more than half of all workers. That's nearly 60% of all paid workers. Okay, so of the workers that are paid either a wage or a salary, nearly 60% are earning hourly wages. Okay, of those who earn an hourly wage, okay, that's where the minimum wage can impact us. The picture here gives you a little bit of a clue. Of those who earn minimum wage, okay, near about 4 in 9, okay, so 44% work in the food service industry. All right. When you looked in the 2.1 standard about how, in general, higher levels of education lead to higher levels of income, okay, 28% of minimum wage workers do not have a high school diploma, okay, and 58% of minimum wage earners graduated high school but do not have a college degree. All right, so that's 86% of all minimum wage earners have a high school degree or lower in terms of their education. What does that mean, though? If you flip that over, that means 14% of minimum wage earners have at least some level of college education. Okay, so it is it's kind of a misnomer. It's a misunderstanding of these jobs to say that minimum wage earners are only, high school teenage kids. Okay, not true. Okay, it might mean that the worker didn't necessarily graduate high school or doesn't have more than a high school education, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are only a teenager or that they're not supporting themselves. Okay, there is a very significant percentage of minimum wage earners who are adults. There are, like I said, 14% of minimum wage earners have some college education. All right. So again, though, in general, the higher level of your education, the more likely it is that your earnings will go up, but it's not a hard and fast rule. Okay, so that's wage earners. Now let's look at salary. Salary is when our earnings are expressed as a yearly amount. Okay, so 30,000 a year, 60,000 a year, 80,000 a year, etc. Okay, you don't just get paid one time a year. Okay, for example, I'm a salaried worker. I don't just get paid one time to work the entire school year. All right, there are lots of different pay options for when you, how often you get paid when you're a salaried earner. All right, you can be paid monthly. Okay, so 12 times a year, once a month. Okay, you can be paid weekly, 52 times a year, or once every week. You could be paid semi-monthly, bi-monthly. Okay, so 2 times a month, or you could be paid bi-weekly, 2 times a week. Or sorry, every 2 weeks, not every 2 weeks. Not 2 times a week, every 2 weeks. What? So let me break this down really quick because there can be a little bit confusion. Okay, the prefix bi means two, right? So bi-monthly could mean, if either way would be correct, if something is biannual, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, whatever. Okay, it could be once every 2 months. Bi-monthly, when it comes to salaries, though, generally means 2 times a month. So more often than not, you'll see the phrase semi-monthly versus bi-monthly. Semi means half, right? So that means every half month you get paid. Okay, bi-weekly here, every 2 weeks. All right, now semi-monthly means 2 times a month. Okay, bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, usually means 2 times a month as well. All right, these are not the same things though, because not every month is exactly 4 weeks. Yeah, there's only one month, and that's February, that's exactly 28 days, right? Where biweekly and semi-monthly would work out to be the same thing. Most months are about 2.5 weeks, right? 30 or 31 days. So there are, if I get paid 2 times a month, there's 12 months in a year, so that would be 24 paychecks. If I get paid every other week, there's 52 weeks in a year, that's 26 paychecks. So 24 paychecks versus 26 paychecks. All right. So most months, if I'm getting paid biweekly, most months I will get paid 2 times a month. But there are some times where the way the month works out that I would get a third paycheck during the month, right? If there are 5 Fridays, if I get paid every other Friday, for example, if there's 5 Fridays in the month, I might get paid the first Friday, the third Friday, and the fifth Friday, right? Because maybe the month starts on a Thursday. And so Friday is the 2nd, then I would get paid again on the 16th, then again on the 30th. Okay. And that would happen 2 times a year. That's where the difference between 24 paychecks and 26 paychecks would occur. So 2 times a year, I would actually get a third paycheck during the month. So these, while they seem very similar and they are similar, they're not the same thing. All right, so let's talk about each one of these pay structures and what these mean. Okay, so the first one, again, monthly salary, you get paid every one time every month. So you get paid 12 times a year. To figure out what your earnings are for that month, you simply take your yearly salary divided by 12. Okay, so if you were to be paid $30,000 a year, how much would you be paid each month, or how much would you earn each month? Well, we would take 30,000 divided by 12. That's $2,500 a month. Okay, weekly salary means you get paid every week. There are 52 weeks in a year, so you would receive 52 paychecks. To determine what you earn each week, you would simply take your yearly salary, your annual salary divided by 52. So again, if you earn 30,000 a year, you get paid weekly. Your earnings each week, 30,000 divided by 52, is $576.92. Again, it's not 92 exactly. We would need to round, and that's why we discussed that, that reminder for how to round. All right. If you get paid semi-monthly, okay, again, that is every half month. Okay, so you usually would get paid either like the first day of the month and the 15th or 16th of the month, or you might get paid on the 15th of the month and then the last day of the month. Okay, but you would get paid 2 times a month or 24 times a year. So your earnings for each paycheck would be your salary divided by 24. Again, if the example is 30,000 divided by 24, that would be $1,250. 30,000 divided by 24. All right. And then the last one is biweekly, or every 2 weeks. Okay. So you would get paid every other week. There's 52 weeks in a year. Divided by 2 means that I would receive 26 payments. Okay. So again, your earnings per paycheck, 30,000 divided by 26 is 1153.85. All right. Last thing that we'll talk about here, tips and commissions, other ways that you can get paid, right? Again, we mentioned tips generally are in service industries. That's when the customer decides to pay the service provider an additional amount. So delivery, drivers, Uber drivers, waiters, waitresses, hotel, turn down services and so on, right? Those types of services generally get tips, and it's up to the customer. In most cases, 15% is about the bare minimum. 18 to 20% is much more common in terms of at least food tips, food service tips. Okay, commissions a little bit different. Commission is when you earn a percent of the sales that you generate, right? So let's say Joe's a salesperson, receives 5% of every sale that he makes. All right. Let's say that today he sold $200. Okay. How much would he earn in commission? Well, we need to take that 5%, turn it into a decimal. So we drop the percentage sign, move the decimal 2 spots to the left. That becomes 0.05. Okay. We take that 0.05 times the $200 that he sold today. He would earn $10 in commission. Now, most people don't earn their entire salary or their entire earnings on commission, right? They might get paid a very low base pay, and then commission is a way of building that up to give them incentive to sell more. Okay. Obviously, if Joe is only earning commissions, he is not doing very well, earning only $10 a day. If he's earning $50,000 a year plus 5% commission, right? Now that $10 is just bonus onto his pay. Last thing to talk about when we're looking at compensation is what's known as non-wage compensation. These are additional benefits that you can receive as part of your job for providing your labor to your employer that doesn't necessarily show up in your paycheck, that doesn't show up in your bank account. All right. So these non-wage compensations, these are ways that the employer can reward the employee for doing the work other than just increasing their pay. All right. So that could be paying for part or all of their health insurance. It could be providing paid sick leave and paid vacation days. It could be contributing to a retirement account. It could be if you're a student while you're working there, some jobs give a tuition reimbursement to encourage you to continue to pursue your education. All right. And so again, all of these are forms of compensation in that they increase the value of what the employer returns to you in exchange for you giving your time and energy and labor to the employer. All right. Once we'll get into deductions at a later time, so we're going to stop here for the moment. So we're stopping the presentation at this point to work on two worksheets that relate back to what we've talked about in terms of earnings and gross pay and net pay. All right. The first worksheet is 2.1 calculating gross pay. The second worksheet is 2.1 pay stubs. The first worksheet, the calculating gross pay, there are 8 different scenarios, all right, in which you need to calculate how much this person earns on a gross basis. So we're not taking out any taxes or any other deductions, right? Just how much they're earning. So in some cases, they're earning minimum wage. Okay. In some cases, they're earning minimum wage, but working overtime. In some cases, they have an annual salary, and you need to figure out what their earnings are per pay period, and so on. All right. Please show your work. So, just type out your work as a way of both signaling to me and to yourself how you got to that answer. All right. When we go over this tomorrow, if all you do is put an answer down for these and you get the wrong answer, okay, not having your work there makes it really hard to go back and remember, how did I come up with this incorrect number? Whereas if you show your work, right, it becomes much easier to say, oh, I just didn't move the decimal over, or I multiplied by 40 hours instead of 30 hours because I misread the question, right? Whatever it is. Having your work there makes it much more easier and much more likely that you can figure out where your mistake was, or if you and I end up, sitting down one-on-one in person or over Teams, right? Being able to look over that work and seeing the steps that you took makes it much easier to make corrections and get you back on the right path. All right. Same thing on assessments. Okay. If you show your steps and maybe you did every step correctly and you just punched in, you just had a little typo in the calculator as you're typing in the work, right? It's much easier for me to see, how you got to that answer and say, okay, you do know the process. You just made a typo when you were using the calculator versus this person doesn't know really, they don't really understand the steps that they're taking, and that's where the error came from, right? So it's much more likely that you would get credit for knowing the material, even if you have the wrong answer, if you can at least show your work. Okay. So please do get in the habit of typing out your work. Okay. Even if you want to do your work on paper first, type it out later. Okay. So again, just 8 scenarios that should go relatively quickly. The second worksheet looks at 3 different pay stubs. So pay stub is basically your receipt for a paycheck. Okay, so every time that you get paid, you get a pay stub along with that paycheck. It can sometimes also be called like a payroll record. But this will give us a nice little kind of preview about where we're going tomorrow. So on the second page, there are 3 pay stubs. There is Jane Brown, who works at Hamburger Palace Enterprises. There is Peter Smith, who works at Banana Bread Box, and there is Mary Stone, who works at Dancerama. Essentially, what you need to do is use those pay stubs to answer these questions. As always, if you run into any difficulties or if you have questions, please reach out to me a number of different ways: email, stop into the classroom, send me a message on Schoology, send me a message on Teams, whatever it takes. Communicate with me if you have questions, if you'd like a little bit more clarity. All right, and I'm absolutely happy to help. I want you to succeed. I want you to understand and feel like you have good grasp on this material. All right. Otherwise, I'll turn you loose, get to work. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll talk next time. See you, everybody.